We're very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Linda Boyd. Linda Boyd is Director of Washington for Impeachment and also Director of Eastside Fellowship of Reconciliation. Linda, thank you very much for spending time with us this morning.
Good morning, Mike.
If we could begin, maybe we could get a brief description of your two organizations, starting with Eastside Fellowship of Reconciliation.
Well, Eastside Fellowship of Reconciliation is located in Bellevue. FOR, Fellowship of Reconciliation, is the world's oldest peace group. It was founded in 1914 when a German soldier and a British soldier decided not to kill each other on Christmas Day. And after that, this idea of reconciliation and of working for peace across lines of disagreement became very popular. So there are chapters all over the world. It's a fabulous organization that addresses so many issues: environmental issues, political issues, ethical issues. They have projects in Colombia, Latin America, all over Latin America and Asia, all over the world. They're a fabulous organization.
All right. And tell us about Washington for Impeachment.
Washington for Impeachment was a group we organized specifically to impeach George Bush and Dick Cheney.
All right. So tell us, how did you get involved in this issue?
Well, it's very interesting. I've had a young child at home, so I haven't been so involved in the past years. And somebody told me that in Bellevue they were going to show Articles of Impeachment, which is a short film put out by Center for Constitutional Rights. And it was specifically addressed impeaching the president. I thought, wow, in Bellevue, I have to go. And that was a film shown by EFOR. Michael Tivana was showing it, and I went, and I was so thrilled that there was a way that I could help to impeach the president. So the next day, I ordered the activist kit. I bought 50 books and CDs, and I got to work. And that's how it began.
All right. So then somewhere along the way, you built an organization.
Yeah, we built an organization. We started to petition. We started to find other advocates for impeachment. And we got down to work finding out how we could impeach through our state legislature, which is what the Center for Constitutional Rights advocates. So we followed their articles of impeachment, and we followed their plan to impeach through the state legislature.
Okay, before we get into the mechanics of that, so what do you feel are the reasons that you're seeking impeachment?
Well, my personal reason to seek impeachment is that what this administration is doing is wrong. War and torture and rendition and subverting the Constitution, these are things that need to be stopped, no matter who's doing them. So it's a nonpartisan issue. It's all about the Constitution and preserving democracy in this country and stopping abuses of people's human rights. Now, that is something that really motivates me. It has to stop now. We cannot participate in genocide. We cannot let there be torture by Americans. And these are abuses that are so horrendous that every person should be standing up and saying, calling for an immediate stop. So that was my motivating factor.
Okay, so talk about these for those that aren't familiar with the kits and how one goes about this. Describe what impeachment really is and the processes that you're taking this through.
Well, impeachment is like an indictment. It's sort of like saying it's like going to court and you're indicted with certain charges. So our charges for impeachment are illegal wiretapping, spying on Americans, illegal war, condoning torture and extraordinary rendition, and disdain for the law. This includes the many, many signing statements that President Bush has made, subverting the Constitution, removing habeas corpus, destroying the balance of power between the three co-equal branches of government, all of these things. But those are, we call them 4 articles.
And you're focusing on George Bush and Dick Cheney?
George Bush and Dick Cheney. When we first started, we were working on George Bush, but then we started working with a coalition of other groups also working for impeachment, and they all had Cheney. So we're we're impeaching Bush and Cheney. And that alleviates people's fear that if we remove Bush, then Cheney would be president. So we'll remove both.
Okay, so take us further through the process now. You've got the people who you want to impeach. Mm-hmm. What's the next steps?
Well, working through the state legislature means that you get a bill in your House or in your Senate. And we did that. We collected petitions, and then we managed to get Senator Eric Omeg to write up the bill, SJM 8016, and introduce it into the state Senate. After that, we had a hearing, and what was a fabulous hearing with a wonderful panel and so many citizen activists speaking very eloquently and intelligently on this issue. And the next thing would be to bring this bill out of committee for a vote. When that happens, then it would go to the floor of the House of Representatives as an item of some privilege.
Now, is that the usual route that impeachment is pursued, or are there multiple ways of doing it?
It's not. There are other ways to impeach. The most common way would be for a member of the House of Representatives to rise to impeach. This is the way that most people are familiar with, and that's what's happened in the past. However, the framers of the Constitution knew that in a time of war, that a president can aggrandize their powers. This is what's happened to our administration. And that Congress might be asleep at the wheel. And that's where we are now. So they made sure that citizens had another way to call their government into account.
And is that in the Constitution?
It is in the Constitution. It comes to us through Jefferson's manual, which was adopted as House rules. So Jefferson's manual 602 through 604 say specifically how impeachment can be initiated. And one way is through the legislature of a state.
Is Jefferson's manual something that people can go and purchase at their local bookstore?
They can look it up. They can look up Jefferson's manual 602 through 604. And they can look up House rules, and they'll find the details there.
So did you try and approach any of our elected representatives that reside in D.C. to pursue this?
Yes, we do. People have been begging members of Congress for years to impeach George Bush. And it has met with a remarkable resistance. Everybody knows that Conyers wrote up an entire investigation and then backed down. So the entire Congress has failed us. They've failed to call this president into account. They've failed in their duty to act as a co-equal branch of government. And they've failed to represent the citizens who are crying out for accountability now.
Did you get a sense for why Representative Conyers did back down?
No, I can't tell you that. I wonder about that every day. Did they bargain something with something? Did they hold a gun to his head? What would make somebody who knows the truth betray the entire population of this country? The truth is out there. There are mountains of evidence. We know that our president has committed fraud by lying about the reasons for starting this war of aggression, this genocide, this occupation of another country. We know that the president has committed fraud about wiretapping the citizens of this country. These are impeachable offenses, destroying the Constitution, subverting our constitutional democracy. These are terrible, terrible high crimes and misdemeanors, we call them. They're something that, especially for a member of government to ignore, is a terrible dereliction of duty.
So you approached Senator Eric Omeg, and he sponsored this bill. What kind of support has it been getting?
This bill has been getting tremendous support from the people. And he also came on with 8 co-sponsors, which is very, very good 8 co-sponsors in the Senate, and we've been getting more and more signatures to our petitions. People have been coming out for rallies and demonstrations, so that when people understand what the issues are, that it's about our Constitution, it's about calling our government into account, they come on.
And where is this bill currently? How's it? Is there a deadline for it?
There is a deadline for this bill. Currently, it's in committee, and it will take a big, big push to get it out of committee. Any bill can be taken up for a vote if the Senate wants to. Our hearing was one day after the cutoff, which was a big problem. And because of that, it takes a special push to get it out of committee. So we do still have until the end of the legislative session to get this bill out. It will be very difficult.
Do you know when the legislative session ends?
It's mid to late April, I think of the 23rd.
So what is your response to people that say this really, the whole idea of impeachment, no matter how you feel about it in your particular party, it's really not appropriate for a state to be pursuing this. These our state legislators have more important things to focus on.
Mm-hmm. The most important thing is the Constitution. Every single elected official in this country has sworn an oath to support and protect the Constitution. So when they say that there are more important issues, that's a red herring. It's absolutely untrue. They have not sworn an oath to fix potholes or make wider highways or even to make sure that schools are funded. The most important part of their job is to support the Constitution. So every elected official who says they don't have time to do this is derelict in their duties.
And would it be correct in saying that the bill you are supporting in Olympia doesn't in fact call for impeachment? It's a process.
That's correct. What we're asking for is minimum due process, which are investigations of the wrongdoings of the president and vice president. When these investigations begin, it will be obvious that they need to be impeached. And this is how an impeachment process starts. It starts with an investigation and the indictment, and then the work is done in committee, and they draw up the articles of impeachment, and then there's a trial in the Senate.
So what is your response to the people that say if this got to D.C., that it would just be a waste of time? It would take them away from more important things, like, for instance, the war in Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the biggest lie. The fastest way to end war in Iraq and to prevent war in Iran is to impeach. The president has been very, very liberal with his use of signing statements, and he's promised to veto any effort to end the war. So the fastest way, the most efficient way, would be to impeach him. Then we can get the work done. Any kind of investigation that's not an impeachment investigation is wasting our time. We need to impeach, and we need to get that done now.
And what has been the reaction at the different levels from both elected officials and from citizens to this? For instance, I know two of our elected officials, Patty Murray and Jay Inslee, both were fairly vocal about this bill in Olympia.
Yeah, that was an odious moment here in Washington State. Jay Inslee and Patty Murray came to Olympia to personally intimidate our senators in Washington, here in Washington State, and to ask them to close down the hearings that had already been scheduled. Mercifully, they did not. They stood up to them. But it really did put a pall over the process. We would have had a companion bill in the House of Representatives here in Washington State. Bob Hasagawa and Marilyn Chase went to Democratic caucus in the House, and Patty Murray was there that day. So people did not have the courage to give us a companion bill. That's authoritarianism in its worst form. That's backroom arm twisting. That is representing the will of the White House to us rather than representing us to Congress and to the White House. They've got it all backwards. Representation comes from the people, and it goes up. It does not come from the top to squish down the grassroots here. To me, it shows an incredible weakness in the Democratic Party. It shows me that they don't know what to do with power. It tells me that they are so tied to the ship of state that they can't absorb the energy and the passion of the grassroots here. People are very involved in this issue, and if the Democrats were smart, they would make that part of their program. Instead of representing the will of the people, they've chosen to cut down the grassroots here. That's authoritarianism.
What is a companion bill? You mentioned that.
A companion bill, it means that the other chamber writes up basically the same legislation, and it moves through that chamber as well.
And do you know of any past instances where representatives from D.C. have come here to try and influence the votes in Olympia?
I'm sure it's happened. I don't know of anything specific, but I do know that this kind of pressure has also happened in New Mexico and in Vermont, and that is really inappropriate.
That kind of pressure for similar bills to what's being proposed here in Olympia?
The first state to have a bill in their Senate was New Mexico. And they went through 3 committees. There was a lot of opposition, but a lot of support as well. And they almost made it. And it was very sad at the end when it didn't get the vote. And it had to do with Republican tricks. They actually held a vote while many of the Democrats were out of the room. And so when the Dems came back and found out about it, they managed to have another vote. But by then, some of the Dems backed out. It was tragic. They almost made it.
And how did it do in the other state?
In Vermont, has a bill now, and it has not come up for a vote yet. But Vermont is very different because they have a town hall tradition. So they passed endorsements or resolutions for impeachment in some 40 towns, maybe more now. They're still doing it. Now the bill has been introduced in Vermont, and it will move through the same legislative process. They could do it for us.
If it fails to pass in this state as well as Vermont, are there other options open?
Yeah, there are still other options. The main one being that a representative to Congress rises to impeach. We intend to deliver our memorial to Congress regardless of what happens here in this state. We have signatures, and we are going to Olympia to collect the signatures of representatives and senators here in Washington State. And if necessary, I will personally deliver this memorial to Congress as a citizen's memorial. And I would like to see New Mexico do that too. The fact that it didn't get through our state legislature does not mean that those people don't still want impeachment. That's what we want.
What is your response to those people that say, the President Bush really and Dick Cheney they have less than 2 years? What is the big deal with, letting them ride out the rest of their time there?
Yeah, this is a common argument. I say even if it's the last day they are in office, they still need to be impeached. Even if war ended tomorrow, we would need to impeach in order to restore integrity to the office and establish rule of law in the executive branch. When crimes or high crimes and misdemeanors in office are not addressed, it means that they become codified and they become a tradition of the presidential office. And we need to put a stop to abuses of power. And the way to do that is through impeachment. And that sends the message that abuses cannot be carried out in the next administration. If we had actually impeached Richard Nixon, I think it would have straightened out the executive to a large degree. If we had made sure that the executive could not expand their powers in this way, we wouldn't be in the trouble we're in now. We couldn't have the war in Iraq if our president followed the rule of law. He's broken international treaties. He's subverted the Constitution. He's broken the rules of our Constitution. Only Congress can declare war.
Impeachment itself is just the removal from office. Is there anything else attached to that? Or?
No, impeachment is actually not the removal of office. Impeachment is the indictment. The impeachment says that we're going to start an investigation. It's sort of like a giant parking ticket. And after that, then the investigations begin, articles are drawn up, and as I said, the trial is held in the Senate. And at the end of that, the Senate votes on whether to remove or not.
Talk about how this has impacted you personally. I can't imagine that, going back just 6+ years that you could imagine that you would be in the place that you are now doing this.
No, it's pathetic. I can't believe I'm running this campaign. For me personally, being a parent has changed my outlook on the world. The buck stops here. And of course, for every citizen, that's true. But especially for me, I cannot allow this government to become so corrupt that it might impact my child's need to become a full person. I feel that living in fear of your government, participating through citizenship in a corrupt and immoral regime would be a terrible thing, a terrible legacy. And I think of how the Germans must have felt after World War II, and how even after all these years, the world sees them as criminals. And it's taken a long time for generations after World War II to reestablish their sense of ethics and to move on in as citizens of a democratic country. I feel that the damages by this administration, the torture, the American Gulag and Guantanamo and around the world, the genocide that we are participating in now is something so huge that it will shadow my son's life forever. And this is apart from the degradation of our Constitution, the fact that 5 out of our 10 amendment rights, our Bill of Rights, are gone. Habeas corpus is gone. So the generations to come, my son, the children growing up now, Americans in future generations will have to live with this and deal with this. And this is our legacy. And that to me is very motivating. I cannot let that pass as a parent and as a citizen.
Has this been fairly hard or wearing on you leading this campaign? Because I have to imagine there's a lot of people that have some pretty strong opinions both ways about the concept of impeachment.
Yeah, well, a campaign of this sort, a grassroots campaign, takes a tremendous amount of energy. Fielding emails, going out to speak, making information, driving to Olympia to talk to legislators. It's all people power. And certainly the fact that I am the major organizer for this is amazing to me. I never, ever expected to run a campaign like this or be involved at this level. If there are people out there who are ready to step up and have organizational skills and have a desire to participate in democracy, please step up now. We need your help. And all across the country, grassroots organizations are crying out for people to help. For every person who's doing a grassroots job, there should be 100 people behind them also doing this job.
And did you really have experience at doing things like this prior to diving in?
No, I have absolutely no experience. I was a professional dancer for many years. I've until very recently, I never spoke in public. It was terrifying for me. And I was home with my young child, so I'm a full-time parent.
And do you have a sense from working on this issue for a while now, exactly what it is that scares people about the concept of impeachment? Because I think everybody has this kind of knee-jerk reaction. You just mentioned it, and it's like, oh, fringe.
Exactly. Well, I think that people think that impeachment is like a revolution. But my answer to that is that impeachment comes to us from our founding fathers. It is the peaceful way to call a government into account. It's the legal way. It's the civil way. The alternative is what's frightening. What if we don't call this government into account? What if any day we can be stopped on the street and put in jail and tortured? I ask people, what is your line that where's your line? Is it the war in Iraq? Will that make you impeach the president? The fraud that got us into the war in Iraq? How about torture? How about the fact that now testimony coerced by torture is admissible in U.S. courts of law? Where is your line? And I like to say to people, what about your children? What is happening now in this country is the responsibility of every citizen. When you speak out, you proclaim your innocence. When you speak out, you say, I am not in collusion. I resist this. And that's what's so powerful. That's a wonderful, empowering moment. The government is paying attention. When people sign the petition, that's an empowered moment. When people write a letter, that's an empowered moment. When people come to sit in the Senate gallery to watch the proceedings, that's an empowered moment. We cannot let the crimes against humanity by this government continue.
Only a couple minutes left. So what are you hoping for people to do?
Well, one thing I'd like people to do is write to the Washington State Senate now and ask for a Senate debate on this issue. We want to talk about impeachment. We want the Senate to address this. The condescension of some of the senators ignoring the pleas of the people to investigate the president and vice president has been unbearable. We also need the Senate to address their responsibility to representing the people here. So the next thing I want people to do is write to the members of Senate, ask them for a Senate debate, and ask them to pass this bill and move it on to Congress. This is the will of the people.
How can people find out more about your organization?
They can go to WashingtonForImpeachment.org.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for spending time with us this morning.
Thanks, Mike.
We have just been talking with Linda Boyd. She is director of Washington for Impeachment. And again, you can find out more from their website at washingtonforimpeachment.org.